Hello everyone. Hope you have been well today. And that was a great intro from Scott. And welcome to my talk. I'm Christos Avraam, and this is what your logs won't tell you: purple teaming in Entra ID and Microsoft 365. Without further ado, let's get started. So, what are we talking about? Why are we here? As security consultants, over the past few years, we have started experimenting with various attacks on cloud environments. And at some point, we started wondering, okay, what to detect, how to detect this type of attacks, what sort of telemetry is there, what tools are available to defenders. So to answer this, we are going to see an overview of the current trend landscape over the past 5 years, that is specifically for Entra ID and Microsoft 365. And we are going to see what has been the main focus for threat actors across the globe. Then we are going to see briefly what a purple team in Entra ID looks like. And then we are going to see some case studies that derived from these assessments. Basically, we are going to see some technical details on some of these cloud attack vectors. And then we are going to see which tooling, or rather what log source, is relevant for each one of them. Then we are also going to provide recommendations on how to prevent this type of attacks when detections fall short. Looking ahead, we are going to present our research status that you might want to stay tuned. And for some, this talk will have actionable action tasks that you can take and apply directly to your environment. For others, it will provide like a broader perspective that you can take away and then have a chat with your internal teams for further discussions. Just a note, we will also provide additional technical information at the end of this talk for those that are interested. Just a bit of who am I? I'm a security consultant here at Reversec, with F-Secure. I'm currently the UK infrastructure service lead, and my research focus is, of course, the topic of this talk, which is Entra ID and Azure hardening and configuration. And I combine it a little bit with Windows internals and Intune policies, etc. Okay, so why Entra is considered a high-value target? Why are attackers so interested in it? It has been globally adopted, especially by large enterprise organizations with 610 million plus users, according to Microsoft, which speaks volumes. Not long ago, identity infrastructure used to sit in a locked server room, literally in the basements of corporate offices, protected by any sort of physical security barrier. But today, that same infrastructure lives on the public internet where anyone can attempt to break in. And that's the thing. Attackers no longer break in, they just log in. Threat actors are shifting tactics. They steal access tokens, bypass conditional access policies, and so on. And the outcome, if successfully compromised, it essentially provides the keys to your entire kingdom. But we have seen a problem. We have seen difficulty from defenders into detecting this type of attacks. But where is this attributed? Why this is happening? Firstly, I wouldn't say that research in this area has been around for more than 10 years, likely less, especially when compared to more established areas like on-prem Active Directory. Also seems like Microsoft changes its infrastructure rather daily, which makes it very hard to keep up with it. And it's not only the novelty of these attacks, but they also exploit legitimate web APIs, which makes malicious activity nearly indistinguishable from real user behavior unless it's analyzed in context. And the biggest problem of them all, in my opinion, well, telemetry has officially become a Netflix subscription. Yes. There are so many Microsoft licenses, it's easy to get lost and unsure what to enable in your environment. If something isn't enabled, you are often unable to investigate an attack properly, essentially flying blind. But here is the catch. Even if you do enable everything, it quickly becomes so expensive, and it still doesn't even guarantee that you will catch what is relevant for your environment. sometimes the cost of trying to detect everything outweighs its value, and especially if a feature can simply be disabled or blocked altogether. All right, now let's see the research behind this talk. We use public threat intelligence to better understand the threat landscape around Entra ID over the past 5 years. We have utilized Microsoft Digital Defense reports and many of their security blogs, Mandiant's threat intelligence reports, and other blogs from Wiz, Trend Micro, and so on. What we have found is that most threat actors linked to Entra ID specifically are state-sponsored groups, primarily originating from China. Some well-known are Sail Typhoon, and Russia, with the most well-known Midnight Blizzard. And you also have some not geographically attributed well-known threat actors, such as Lapsus. So how these threat actors compromise cloud identities? We have created this heat map that tries to answer that question. On the vertical axis, we have GRU TTP's per attack surface, and on the horizontal axis are the microfaces. You can see some high activity in the initial access on your far left, and also some more high activity in the persistence activity side of things, following with some medium activity on credential access. Okay, but what does this tell us? What are the observations from this heat map? If we exclude supply chain attacks, phishing remains the dominant initial access technique. Common methods include consent phishing, device code phishing, using Evil Nginx, impersonating Microsoft services in emails, and of course, large-scale password spray attacks. Once in the environment, we see heavy targeting of service principals. Adversaries impersonate enterprise applications by compromising existing or creating new ones, providing long-term persistence that is very hard to spot in routine monitoring. These techniques often bypass conditional access policies, since protections for service principals particularly are not enforced by default. Keep that in mind, we will discuss about it later on. Apologies, I forgot to add that, okay. Although tenant-wide reconnaissance does occur, threat actors show a clear focus on compromising users' mailboxes. They query the Graph API, configure delegated access, or run purview content searches to extract sensitive emails and attachments. Microsoft Teams has also becoming the preferred social engineering vector. In some cases, threat actors gain access to the user's cloud join workstations and extract session tokens. These tokens are then used to move laterally across the internal environment. We haven't seen many impact-driven actions. Most threat actors prioritize stealth and persistence in the environment. That said, there was a case where Lapsus, after they compromised the tenant, they delete all global administrators in the tenant to seize control. And finally, regarding to privilege escalation, this tends to be a bit indirect, usually with overprivileged Azure resources like virtual machines, key vaults, synced on-premises identities, or any other exposed credentials from connected systems. Before we jump into the case studies, let's talk about how they derive from. From those that aren't familiar with the concept of purple team assessments, long story short, they are collaborative projects between security consultants and the organization's SOC teams, where isolated attacks are executed in order to assess the organization's detection capabilities. Purple teaming in the cloud is a bit different from traditional on-prem environment, not by far, but still some key differences. To simulate a compromised identity, access is usually provided not just on an endpoint, but also on the cloud's control plane, and sometimes might require higher than usual permissions into the environment. A caveat here, test cases could be executed a little bit slower than you normally would expect, and that's because there isn't an automation framework for these activities at this point. Some of the tools used include open source tools like Raw Tools and Azure Hound, and of course some custom scripts that we have developed internally in the company, such as Python and PowerShell scripts. Just a teaser, we might release this kind of toolings in our GitHub page at some point. Now that we have seen what threat actors focus on, begs a question, how do you find the needle? Here is a matrix that shows which log sources provide visibility to which Entra ID related attacks. Just to note here, don't worry about following all of this right now. The material, as I said, will be provided after this talk to view at your own time. On the left-hand side, you will see log table names as they appear in a log analytics workspace. The log sources in the upper half of the matrix, things like signing logs or audit logs, are usually available by default, whereas in the lower half of the matrix includes stuff like Microsoft Graph Activity logs, which usually require additional licensing or integration with third-party tooling to become available. On the top, we have techniques categorized based on common log sources. And this basically will form the case studies that we are going to see shortly. Unfortunately, due to the time of this talk, we are going to examine only 4 out of these 7 case studies. And just a bit of a disclaimer here, the case studies behind this matrix all come from large enterprise environments. So there is an implicit assumption that the tenant is licensed for at least Entra P1 or P2. Unified audit logs are configured in Purview, and that all audit and security logs are forwarded to a central CM. That said, visibility in different organizations still varies. It depends on what features are licensed, what is actually turned on, and how these are all configured. Before we get started on the case studies, I just wanted to give just a bit of terminology here, and specifically on the difference between the various tokens that you can get. You have the access tokens. This grants access to one application for a very short time of period. This is when you use your credentials. You have the refresh tokens that it gets you a new access tokens without requiring to enter your credentials again. And you also have something that is called the primary refresh token, or PRT. Please note, specific note to that, because this is a special token issued when a device is joined to Entra ID. This is stored locally on the device, and it gives a very long access time to an attacker, usually for 90 days. And consider this as a master key that is used to request the other 2 types of tokens. So this is very critical to protect these type of tokens. All right, just a slight warning here. Apologies, from this point onward, we might start getting a little bit more technical. We have some notes for the SOC teams to cover, but no worries if you zoom out a bit. I will give a summary of the case studies at the end of this section. So, most organizations, they use Windows 365 for remote working purposes. So essentially, these are the new employee virtual laptops. And although they are a bit costly, they provide a very good degree of flexibility. The attack scenario here is that an attacker has to manage to compromise such a device and extract the PRT token we have examined earlier. Here we present some technique variations like browser core and the usage of a specific DLL, note the DLL name. And we also have the web account manager abuse, which is a different variation, but all of these serve the exact same purpose. Okay. What log sets are available for this? You have the signing logs that show the initial token issuance and all related PRT requests. You have the device events, but the device tables, but this is only if Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is enabled, and it can alert on some of these activities. And you also may see some logs in the common security log, but this is only relevant if you have other custom network integration solutions, such as Palo Alto, Cisco, Zscaler, etc., and you have configured these data connectors. But we have seen a problem. Microsoft Defender is not shown to alert on 2 of the variations that we have seen earlier, and that's specifically with the usage of that specific DLL. So, what can you do about this? The first one is to add an additional telemetry, and the idea here is to create a Windows Defender application control policy that will create an audit event each time that specific DLL is used. This will be then populated in device events table for MD to pick it up. There is a reference in the slides by a blog post by Robe, which explains exactly how this can be set up in your tenant. As a prevention measure, something that we definitely recommend to most of our clients is enforcing continuous access evaluation. This ensures that token-based sessions are reevaluated in near real time when key conditions change, such as device state, location, user risk, and essentially this limits the utility of a compromised PRT. As access can be revoked and revalidated instantly when suspicious activity is observed. All right, now let's see a similar scenario. In this case study, the attacker doesn't compromise a device, but instead registers or joins a virtual one when they compromise a user. Imagine literally as small as ghost devices living in your tenant. Then they optionally might register a Windows Hello for Business key for persistence purposes. Think of it as a replacement for username and password. Then they obtain the PRT from the device. And here note that this doesn't require much effort from the attacker in contrast to the previous scenario, as they are the ones who created the device. Hence, they have its own keys in contrast to previous where your IT or sysadmins will have these keys. Then they might, again, optionally modify the session token to include an MFA claim if the original one doesn't already have it. And then they might attempt to bypass conditional access policies that require device compliance. The attacker may attempt to spoof, essentially, the Intune compliance. This was previously possible with tooling like AAD internals by Nestori. Microsoft has since been a little bit better about this and implemented patches to increase the complexity of this technique. But there are still signs of successful executions observed in the wild, as shown from this exposed by Dergian. Attackers can then inject the PRT token into the browser or use it in a CLI tooling to access basically what the user could access before, such as emails, Teams, administrator portals, or whatever resources. Okay, what logs are available here? Sign-in logs, exactly the same as before. You may see Intune logs regarding Intune compliance audit events. And you also have audit logs that can capture device registration and the configuration of Windows Hello keys. But there is a big problem, as we have seen difficulty from defenders, even with a lot of available budget to investigate these type of logs. Even when all of the relevant logs are collected, the challenge lies in correlating events across different log sources. The malicious flow mirrors normal device behavior, making it extremely difficult to isolate without context. This results in high false positive rates for detection rules and incomplete incident investigations for that matter. So again here, what can be done? Another warning here, we might get also a bit technical. Feel free to zone out if you are not an analyst. We are going to present some KQL queries. And for analysts, you don't have to worry. Again, we will provide these KQL queries at the end of this presentation. So the first thing that you can try is to look for the user agent that the raw TX uses. Obviously, this is a very weak signal to go about it, as this can be so easily modified by an attacker. The second thing that you can try is what we said earlier, attempt to correlate sequential PRT events for the same user within a short time window. Here, we select a time window. Again, this can be tailored for your environment. Here, we select 15 minutes. The first step is to go to the sign-in logs and find the original token issuance, which has a specific client ID and a specific resource ID that you can extract from the sign-in logs. The second step is the actual device registration. We go back to the audit logs to capture this event. The third step is the actual PRT token issuance. It can be done with either the username credentials or using the refresh token. It has some variations on the client ID that is going to be used, as is shown in your screen. And again, these are specifics, client IDs, and specific resource ID that you can extract from your sign-in logs. The fourth step, again, this is optional, is about the PRT enrichment, where an attacker might attempt to use MFA and put MFA on the claim of the token. And again, this here will have a specific app ID and a specific resource ID. And the fifth step is the actual usage of the PRT token to access services. For client ID here, in your KQL queries, for example, you can select sensitive resources that most matters in your organization. For example, Outlook, MS Teams, or MS Graph, the most critical applications that an attacker will use into the tenant after they obtain that PRT token. And once you have all 5 of them, you just merge them together to create your correlation rule. Similarly, the same thing can happen with Windows Hello for keys. This has similar type that you can have. You have the audit logs, which is the original registration of the key. The exchange for the PRT token. Again here, same scenario, same pattern. An exact client ID, an exact resource ID that you can extract from this table. And then finally is the use of the PRT token. So that said, none of these signals, unfortunately, offer reliable detection at the end of the day, as they require a lot of tailoring. And they can't capture, obviously, every situation and every scenario. So correlation is possible, but fidelity is still low. All right, now let's go to the third scenario. So service principal abuse remains the most prominent vector for persistence and stealthy access in Azure environments, as we have earlier seen. TAs compromise service principals and use them to send internal phishing emails, listen, extract email content, or create forwarding rules to extract, again, sensitive emails. What logs are available? There's plenty. You have the signing logs for the service principal authentication. You have the risky service principals that offers Microsoft custom detection rules. You have Office activity logs in Exchange actions. You have Microsoft Graph activity logs if the attackers use the Graph API. So there is plenty of log sources. So the problem here is not about the challenge detecting this. The challenge is rather costly to get all of these. Licenses are often required for most of these logs, and the most prominent one that is required is something called Workload ID. Although there is a free version of Workload ID, which provides sign-in activity and audit trail, the premium version provides an additional detail that is often required beyond the basic risk and timestamp. It has essentially Microsoft's own detection behavioral rules. These licenses also offer conditional access policies, which can restrict access, let's say, only from a specific IP address, even if the service principal's credentials are compromised. As such, on regards if this is necessary or not, a weighted decision needs to be made on how much it's going to cost your organizations, how many service principals that you have, and which are the most high value in your tenant. And basically then compare it with if there is an appetite internally to try to simulate those custom detection rules from your side, from your teams, which in theory can achieve the same things that Microsoft is doing. On to our fourth and final case study, we have the Microsoft Graph API that is used to enumerate the Entra ID tenant, enumerate object principals, or objects, or groups, etc. And here the attacker uses mostly known user tools like Road Recon or Azure Hound. Its predecessor, Azure ID Graph, is officially deprecated and removed from the tenant 2 days ago. Well, at least we hope so. As Microsoft did not offer any sort of telemetry for this API, so it needed to be gone. Now, the Graph API at least, for the Graph API at least, they offer the Microsoft Graph activity logs that they can provide a full detail on this type of requests. But again, this has so many problems. Firstly, cross-tenant or multi-tenant enumeration isn't captured. Telemetry is delayed up to 2 hours, and we have seen reports for some of the defenders that not all of the requests are logged consistently. Obviously, this will create a lot of problems when and affect detection rules against the non-enumeration tools that we have earlier discussed, which most of the times are volume-based. We haven't attributed at this point, unfortunately, why this is happening. In addition, extensive research has been made by, of course, Reversec's own Christian Filipov in various conferences like Forward CloudSec and also ex-colleague Alet Mehta on alternative APIs that can be used to enumerate the tenant without a single trace of telemetry, as is not offered by Microsoft for them. For example, it includes Ibiza API, and I don't know if you have seen the Forward CloudSec talk 2 days ago. Chris just popped up another invisible APIs in SharePoint, basically. Unfortunately, again, there isn't a particular solution to this problem at this point, but still is recommended to have the Microsoft Audit Logs enabled into your tenant and attempt at least to create some custom detection rules tailored to your environment. All right, so what's next? How do we close detection gaps? We are researchers on top of consultants, and the objective is to expand testing coverage to simulate what threat actors are already doing and find more detection opportunities. Firstly, we see here that case studies that were included in this research, but we didn't have time to talk about them in this talk. We have the Azure DevOps and Azure resources that they are missing telemetry for various read operations. There just isn't any telemetry for them. And you also have the MS Teams phishing, which is missing telemetry for messages for obvious privacy reasons. And also, we see here some focus areas that we are actively trying to develop on, to develop new Microsoft 365 DTPs, including MS Teams, Exchange Online, and Purview-based attacks. We are also trying actively to investigate federation weaknesses, ADFS-based techniques to move from cloud to on-prem, and as ADFS is a blind spot for many organizations' cloud detection strategies. And we also try to simulate the reverse, so moving from on-prem to cloud, such as via Entra ID Connect, as most organizations do not follow Tier 0 architecture when it comes to this type of controls. Well, phew, the lengthy part is now gone. And for those that haven't already slept, what have we learned? Who needs cloud? Let's go back on-prem, am I right? No, just kidding. So, attackers no longer rely on malware or exploits. Instead, they exploit legitimate tools like tokens, service principals, and APIs, and they often leave no obvious signs of compromise. If it looks normal in the logs, it's hard to stop. Detection depends on what's logged, where it's stored, and sometimes, unfortunately, what licenses or what tools you are using. However, gaps will still exist, not just due to coverage, but also due to correlation complexity. Although pre-built tools and solutions offer value, real-world threats often require custom rules built around how your organization actually uses cloud services. So at the end of the day, detections will be judged by your own manual efforts. You can't rely, obviously, on alerts alone. Preventive controls such as conditional access policies, device policies should be restricted where possible, but they must, again, tailored to your architecture and threat model. Well, that's all. Thank you for your attention. Hope you have enjoyed this talk. Yep. We have some time for Q&A. Think so? Yep. Anybody wants to ask? Bear with me 1 second.
Hi. Thank you for the very good presentation. One question coming from risk management part. I might oversimplify things, but isn't like Entra ID and the infrastructure underlying it like Microsoft's responsibility in shared responsibility matrices? And yet they are just like taking money from people for even enabling the logging so that the customers of Microsoft can do this detection. Shouldn't this be like on their table?
Well, I'm not the one to say who should take the responsibility or not. We are where we are at this moment, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, similarly to any cloud environment, let's face it, your security teams should have a shared responsibility. It's the same when using someone else's infrastructure. At the end of the day, yes, Microsoft should do their due diligence. And don't get me wrong, they are trying. We have seen improvements on vulnerabilities that they have reported by both our consultants, by both researchers out there, such as Dergian or any other known researchers, we have seen improvements in what Microsoft is doing. But let's face it, it's something that you use in your organization. You as well need to figure out what other solutions need to be there on top of what already Microsoft is doing. That was one of my key takeaways, that we as well, the organizations as well, need to take some actions towards securing their environments. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Cool, that's all. Right, thank you so much, everyone, again.